I used these settings to win the North American ALGS Pro League, and I even had the 3rd most kills out of everyone in North America. These settings are tried and tested against the sweatiest and most competitive players on the planet. Let's get into it. Alrighty, the age-old question, what is better, linear or classic? Alright, so before I explain anything, I just wanted to give a general statement on the two sensitivities for people that aren't really like wanting to watch the whole video. And I will say, after tons of time using both linear and classic, and a few different, numbers on those response curves, I can confidently say that 4-3 linear small dead zone is the easiest and most consistent sense to use in a game right now. If you're a new player, old player, you're trying to go pro, you're trying to play casual, it doesn't matter. This sense is so easy to use and is so good and consistent. I would recommend this to anybody. This sense is right now, I think, is like the god sense. Let's start with classic. So classic is the most common response curve. I would say if you're gonna play in classic, I would recommend using no dead zone. If you have to use small dead zone, you probably should just get a new controller, because if you're getting bad stick drift on no dead zone, then your controller is like really bad. So I would definitely recommend no dead zone in classic. Also, the pros of classic compared to linear is classic is easier to use for slow shooting precision weapons, like the 30-30 wingman. It's really good to like line up like super precise shots. Like I can center my aim on the middle of this target like perfectly, like really quickly. Whereas in linear, that'd be a bit hard to do because it's hard to make these super precise adjustments on classic. But another thing that classic allows you to do, because like the inner range of the thumbstick on classic allows for so much range of motion. Like it's basically super slow moving at the start, so you can make really precise adjustments. So you can kind of go crazy with the recoil control. I haven't used classic in a while, so my flatline recoil is kind of bad, but you can essentially control every single bullet on classic. Whereas on linear is too sensitive. You can't control like bullet by bullet. You can't really like jitter aim on linear. Linear is kind of just like smooth movements. But like classic basically is way more precise than linear. Now the trade-off is when you're tracking somebody left and right, it is much harder to control the recoil while you're tracking left and right. And that's because on classic you have way less margin of error at like the medium input range of your thumbstick compared to linear, where you have way more margin of error. So on linear, all you have to do to control your recoil is just move your thumbstick down in a straight line. Whereas in classic, you kind of have to account for like every individual bullet. Like it's basically a lot more precise. Like it almost has a higher skill gap for controlling recoil. Classic does, but it's still way harder to track people while they're moving on classic compared to linear. And I'd say that's probably the worst thing about classic is like it's really hard to track people while they're moving and controlling recoil well at the same time. It's not like quick enough. You have to like really think about where the bullets are going, and you have to be really good with the recoil patterns. Where in linear, I don't think you have to be that good with the recoil patterns. Another bad thing about classic is on horizon, especially with like 2x on your guns, it's really hard to shoot people going up the lift. You have to move your thumbstick way further to actually track somebody while going up a horizon queue, compared to linear where you don't have to move it as much. So you have a lot more like free range of motion to shoot, like track somebody while you're going up and down. It's like right here, I can't like track this guy at all. I mean, I also have a 2x on my flatline, which makes it even harder. Like even on the 1x, I'm having to crank my thumbstick down as hard as I can to shoot this guy. Whereas on linear, it's not big of an issue. All right, let's talk about the benefits of linear, which is what I currently play on and what I currently recommend. So the pros for linear. Recoil control is so simple on linear. You don't actually have to like control the recoil pattern. You just basically pull in a general direction. So the volt goes up and to the right, you just pull down to the left, and that's it. It's that simple. You just pull down to the left. You don't have to like jitter your aim or your thumb back and forth at all. It's just like a smooth motion. It's really easy to control. Now you can't control at like ultra long distances. That's the trade-off. Like I'll never be able to imitate my long-range classic flatline sprays on linear, because linear you just can't control like precise parts of the recoil pattern. You can only like move it in general directions. It's like I could never hit like an insane spray, as insane of a spray on linear than I would classic from this far away. Now you can still control the recoil decently well from this far away on linear, but just not as good as classic. But here's the thing. The thing about controller is, like, you're never going to be shooting someone this far away anyways. So it's kind of pointless to be able to, like, control it that well on Classic. And I'd rather have the trade-off to have a bit more margin of error at, like, the medium input speeds. Like, when somebody's close to you, like this, like someone's right in front of you with a 2x, and you're tracking up and down, it's way easier to do on linear, because you don't have to, like, worry about the recoil as much. You basically just, like, pull in a general direction where the guy's going, and slightly counteract with the recoil. Another thing is linear has actual no dead zone. Like, if you put it on no dead zone, you're gonna get crazy stick drift. And that's because linear is actually no dead zone. Classic is not no dead zone. You put Classic on no dead zone, and it doesn't move at all. That's because it's not actually no dead zone. I don't know why it is that way, but it's just the way it is. That's why I recommend small dead zone linear over no dead zone. And another benefit of the dead zone being smaller on linear is it just feels more responsive. You can basically you can move your thumbstick to the speed where you're tracking somebody way faster. Like, I barely have to move my thumbstick for it to go to the left like this. Whereas on Classic, I have to push my thumbstick a lot further, especially to change directions. On linear, it's like a slight movement. And on Classic, you have to really jerk your thumbstick around to track somebody. A lot smoother on linear. Another thing is, it's easier to shoot players that are like tap strafing around, or just hitting insane wall bounces or like movement on you, because you can change directions faster on linear, and it's easier to control recoil as well. You don't have to think about recoil. You can move up and down a bit easier, I think, on linear. And it's even easier to like shoot people while you're moving fast yourself. So if I'm like sliding towards a guy, it's really easy to account for the recoil on linear while you're moving at like quick speeds. Whereas on Classic, it's a bit harder to do, because you don't have as much margin of error at the medium input speeds. Because the thing about Classic is, like, Classic is good when you're just barely moving your thumbstick like this. Now linear is good when you're tracking somebody at like medium speed, which is the most common gunfight speed, you know? When I'm strafing left and the guy's strafing right or something. Whereas Classic is just really good for like super precise pinpoint shooting. It's just not what you run into in Apex that often. But yeah, overall, I would recommend 4-3 linear small dead zone over Classic any day of the week. I think linear is just so much easier to use. Like, controlling recoil is just way easier. Yeah, I think it's just better. It's just an overall better sense than 4-3 Classic.